Have you ever wondered what happens when the most powerful being in the supernatural world makes the biggest mistake of his immortal life? When a single word whispered in anger destroys the one connection that made centuries of darkness bearable? This is the story of Marcus Blackthorne, a vampire king who ruled with an iron fist for over 800 years, and Elena Rosewood, the human woman who unknowingly became his salvation. It's about the moment when pride and fear collided, creating wounds that seemed impossible to heal. It's about what happens when someone who has never needed anyone suddenly discovers that need isn't weakness, it's the only thing that makes existing worthwhile. Sometimes the most powerful people are the most broken inside. Sometimes a single cruel word can shatter everything beautiful. And sometimes, just sometimes, love is strong enough to survive even the darkest of betrayals. But only if both hearts are brave enough to fight for it. What you're about to read isn't just a love story. It's a journey through the shadows of regret, the agony of separation, and the desperate hope that some mistakes can still be forgiven. It's about learning that true strength isn't about standing alone. It's about having the courage to admit when you're wrong and fight for what matters most. Are you ready to discover whether love can truly conquer all, even when it's between a monster and the woman who saw his humanity? The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackthorne mansion, each droplet like a tiny fist demanding entry into the sanctuary where Marcus Blackthorne stood motionless. His reflection in the dark glass showed a man who appeared to be in his early 30s, but his eyes held the weight of centuries. Those same eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires now stared at the empty driveway where Elena's car had been parked just hours before. Marcus ran his fingers through his dark hair, a gesture that had once been unconscious but now felt foreign. Everything felt foreign without her presence filling the spaces between his carefully constructed walls. The mansion that had been his fortress for over 2 centuries now felt like a tomb, and he was both the corpse and the mourner. It had been 3 days since their argument, 3 days since he had spoken the words that had drained the color from Elena's face and sent her running from his life. 3 days of silence that felt longer than the decades he had spent alone before she had stumbled into his world, with her bright smile and stubborn determination to see good in everything, even in him. The memory played in his mind like a broken record, each repetition more painful than the last. Elena had been trying to help again, as she always did. She had noticed his struggle with the mounting pressures from the Vampire Council, the way his shoulders carried tension that never seemed to ease, the way he had been isolating himself even from her. In her gentle way, she had tried to break through the walls he had built around his heart. "Marcus, you don't have to carry everything alone," she had said, her hand reaching for his across the mahogany desk in his study. "Let me help you. Let me be there for you." Her words had been meant as comfort, but they had struck him like a physical blow. For 800 years he had survived by depending on no one, trusting no one completely, keeping his vulnerabilities locked away where they couldn't be used against him. The idea that he might need her, that he had become dependent on her warmth and light, terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced. Fear made him cruel. Fear made him say the one thing he knew would hurt her most. "Needy," he had whispered, the word falling from his lips like poison. "You're being needy, Elena. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone." The way her face had changed in that moment would haunt him for the rest of his immortal existence. The light in her brown eyes had flickered and died, replaced by a pain so deep it made his chest ache. She had pulled her hand back as if his skin had burned her, and for a moment, neither of them had spoken. "I see," she had said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for bothering you." He had wanted to take the words back immediately, to explain that his fear had spoken for him, that she was the furthest thing from needy he could imagine. Elena was independent, strong, capable of standing on her own 2 feet in a world that often tried to knock her down. She had never asked him for anything except the chance to care about him. But pride and old habits had sealed his lips, and he had watched her gather her dignity around herself like armor. "Elena, wait," he had started, but she was already moving toward the door. "No, you're right," she had said without turning around. "I was overstepping. I won't bother you anymore." The finality in her voice had sent ice through his veins, but still he had said nothing. He had let her walk away because admitting his mistake felt too much like admitting weakness, and weakness was something Marcus Blackthorne could not afford. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of Elena keeping her word with a thoroughness that impressed and terrified him. She had stopped texting him good morning messages. She had stopped calling to check if he had remembered to feed properly. She had stopped showing up at his office with coffee, and that smile that could melt the ice around his heart. She had stopped reaching out entirely. The silence was deafening. Marcus moved away from the window, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway as he made his way to his study. The room still smelled faintly of her perfume, something light and floral that had always seemed to chase away the shadows that clung to him. Her book still lay on the side table where she had left it, a romantic novel with a bright cover that she had been trying to convince him to read. It's about second chances, she had told him, her eyes dancing with mischief. About people who think they're too broken to be loved, learning that everyone deserves happiness. He had scoffed at the time, dismissing it as unrealistic human nonsense. Now, staring at the abandoned book, he wondered if she had been trying to tell him something important. His phone buzzed on the desk, and for a moment, his dead heart almost remembered how to race. But it wasn't Elena. It was Victor, his second in command, with another update about council business that felt meaningless without Elena's grounding presence. The Northwood clan is still pushing for a meeting, Victor's text read. They're getting impatient. Marcus stared at the message without responding. A week ago, Elena would have helped him strategize, would have listened to his concerns, and offered insights that surprised him with their wisdom. She had a way of seeing situations from angles he missed, of finding solutions that satisfied everyone involved. She had made him a better leader without even trying. Now he was back to handling everything alone, the way he had for centuries before her. The way he had told her he preferred it. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to protect himself from needing her, he had discovered just how much he had come to depend on her presence in his life. Not in the weak, desperate way he had feared, but in the way a man depends on air to breathe. Elena had become essential to his existence, and he had driven her away because he was too proud and too afraid to admit it. His study door opened without a knock, which meant it was either Victor or someone with a death wish. It was Victor, his pale face showing concern that he rarely allowed himself to express. "You look terrible," Victor said without preamble, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. "When was the last time you fed?" Marcus couldn't remember. Food had lost all appeal since Elena left, and blood felt like ash in his mouth. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't left this house in 3 days, you're not answering council communications, and you look like you're about to collapse." Victor leaned forward, his expression serious. What happened with the human? The question hit like a physical blow. Victor had never approved of Marcus's relationship with Elena, had always maintained that getting involved with a human was dangerous and foolish. But he had also seen how Elena's presence had changed Marcus, had watched his friend become more human himself under her influence. "She's gone," Marcus said simply. "Gone where? For how long? Gone. Permanently." The words tasted like poison on his tongue. "I ended it." Victor was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face with ancient eyes that had seen too much. "You ended it, or you sabotaged it?" The accuracy of the question made Marcus flinch. Victor knew him too well, had been by his side for too many centuries not to recognize his self-destructive patterns. "She was getting too close," Marcus said, the excuse sounding hollow, even to his own ears. Don't. Victor's voice was sharp. "Don't lie to me, and don't lie to yourself. I've watched you for 800 years, Marcus. I've never seen you as happy as you've been these past months with her. I've never seen you as alive." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth, that Marcus didn't want to face. He had been happier with Elena. He had felt more like the man he had been before he was turned, before centuries of violence and politics had hardened his heart into stone. "It doesn't matter," Marcus said finally. "It's done." "Is it?" Victor stood, moving to the window where Marcus had been standing earlier. "Because from what I can see, you're more miserable than you've been in decades. And if you think Elena is just going to move on and forget about you, you're more foolish than I thought." "What do you mean?" Victor turned back to him, a sad smile on his face. "I mean, she's human, Marcus. Humans don't love the way we do. They don't move on easily from connections that matter. She's probably hurting just as much as you are." The thought of Elena in pain because of his words made something twist violently in Marcus's chest. He had been so focused on his own regret that he hadn't fully considered what his rejection had done to her. Elena, who had never been anything but kind to him, who had seen past his monsters to find something worth caring about, was somewhere out there believing that she was needy and unwanted. "I called her needy," Marcus said quietly, the admission feeling like a confession. Victor's eyebrows rose. Eleanor, the woman who runs her own business, volunteers at 3 different charities, and managed to stand toe-to-toe with you in every argument you've ever had? You called her needy? She was trying to help me with council business. She said I didn't have to carry everything alone. Marcus's voice was barely audible. It scared me. So you heard her instead of admitting you were afraid? Victor shook his head. You really are an idiot sometimes. Marcus didn't argue. The past 3 days had made it clear that Victor was right. He was an idiot, and worse, he was a coward. He had spent centuries facing down enemies who could destroy him without breaking a sweat, but the thought of admitting he needed Elena's love had sent him running like a child. She's not going to reach out again, Marcus said, more to himself than to Victor. She said she wouldn't bother me anymore. Then you'd better figure out how to reach out to her. Because this... Victor gestured around the empty study, at Marcus's hollow appearance, at the misery that seemed to emanate from every corner of the mansion.
This isn't living.
This is just existing, and you've been doing that for far too long already. Victor left him alone with that truth, and Marcus sank back into his chair, staring at Elena's abandoned book. He picked it up with careful fingers, as if it might crumble at his touch, and read the back cover. Sometimes love means being brave enough to fight for someone, even when they've given up on themselves. The words seemed to mock him. Elena had been brave enough to love him despite everything he was. She had been brave enough to try to help him, to break down his walls, to see him as worth saving. And how had he repaid that bravery? By calling her needy and pushing her away. But maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still a chance to fix what he had broken, to prove that he could be as brave as she had been. Maybe he could learn to need someone, without seeing it as weakness. Marcus opened the book to the first page and began to read, hoping that somewhere in its pages he might find the courage to fight for the only person who had ever made his long existence feel like a life worth living. Elena Rosewood had always prided herself on being strong. At 28, she had built a successful interior design business from nothing, had weathered her parents' disapproval of her unconventional career choice, and had survived a relationship with a man who had turned out to be more interested in her bank account than her heart. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to trust her instincts, and to never let anyone make her feel small. But sitting in her apartment on a rainy Thursday afternoon, surrounded by fabric samples and design magazines that she couldn't focus on, Elena felt smaller than she had in years. Marcus's word echoed in her mind like a curse, growing louder and more painful with each repetition. Needy. She had replayed their last conversation 1,000 times, analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment leading up to his casual dismissal of her care. Had she really been needy? Had she overstepped some invisible boundary by wanting to help the man she loved? Had she misread everything between them so completely? Her best friend Sarah had been trying to convince her otherwise for 3 days straight. Elena, honey, you are literally the most independent person I know, Sarah had said during her daily check-in call that morning. You started your own business at 23. You bought your own apartment. You learned to change your own oil because you didn't want to depend on anyone else to do it. If Marcus thinks you're needy, then Marcus is an idiot. But Sarah didn't understand the full picture. Sarah didn't know that Marcus was a vampire, that he carried the weight of an entire supernatural world on his shoulders, or that his past was filled with betrayals that had taught him to trust no one. Elena had thought she understood why Marcus kept people at arm's length, why he struggled to let anyone close. She had thought her patience and gentle persistence were slowly breaking down his walls. Apparently, she had been wrong. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from a potential client, and she forced herself to focus on work. Mrs. Henderson wanted to discuss a complete redesign of her living room, and Elena needed the distraction. She needed to remember that she had a life outside of Marcus Blackthorne, that she had been complete before she met him. The problem was that she didn't feel complete anymore. Meeting Marcus had been an accident, the kind of random encounter that romance novels were built around. She had been working late at a client's house in the expensive part of town when her car had broken down in a thunderstorm. She had been standing in the rain, phone dead and no idea how she was going to get home, when a sleek black car had pulled up beside her. The man who had stepped out of that car had looked like something out of a dark fairy tale. Tall and elegant, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see right through her. He had been the most beautiful and terrifying person she had ever encountered. When he had offered her a ride, every instinct had told her to say no. Instead, she had found herself saying yes. That 20-minute drive had changed everything. Marcus had been different than she had expected. Polite but distant, offering her his coat when he noticed she was shivering, asking careful questions about her work that suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. There had been something lonely about him, something that called to the part of Elena that had always been drawn to lost things. When he had dropped her off at her apartment, she had expected never to see him again. Instead, he had shown up at her office 2 days later with a business proposition. His mansion needed updating, he had said, and he had been impressed by her portfolio. The job would take months and pay enough to set her up for the next year. Elena should have known there was more to the story. Normal people didn't live in mansions that looked like they belonged in Victorian England. Normal people didn't have staff who seemed to glide rather than walk, who spoke in careful whispers and avoided direct eye contact. Normal people didn't have the kind of presence that made everyone in a room take notice without trying. But Elena had been charmed despite herself. Working at the mansion had meant spending time with Marcus, and spending time with Marcus had revealed layers she hadn't expected. He was intelligent and well-read, with opinions on everything from architecture to philosophy. He was surprisingly funny when he let his guard down, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He was also deeply sad in a way that made her want to wrap her arms around him and promise that whatever had hurt him was in the past. It had taken her 3 months to realize what he was, and another month to convince him that she didn't care. "You should be terrified," he had told her the night he finally revealed his true nature, showing her his fangs and the inhuman speed with which he could move. "You should run and never look back." Instead, Elena had stepped closer, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a strange sense of rightness. "I've known there was something different about you from the beginning," she had said. "I just didn't know what. I'm a monster, Elena. I've killed people. I've done things that would give you nightmares." "Everyone has things in their past they're not proud of," she had replied, reaching up to touch his face with gentle fingers. "What matters is who you are now." That night had been the beginning of everything real between them. Marcus had kissed her like a man drowning, like she was the air he needed to breathe, and Elena had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with him. For 6 months, they had built something beautiful together. Marcus had shown her parts of his world, had introduced her to Victor and some of the other vampires in his inner circle, had trusted her with secrets that could have gotten them both killed. Elena had brought color into his carefully controlled existence, had made him laugh, had convinced him to try new things and visit new places. She had thought she was helping him heal from whatever had made him so afraid of connection. She had thought they were building a future together. Instead, she had been needy. Eleanor's laptop chimed with an email, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. She opened it without much enthusiasm, expecting another work inquiry or spam, but froze when she saw the sender's name. Victor Kozlov. She had only met Marcus's second-in-command a handful of times, but she had liked him despite his initial coldness. He was protective of Marcus in the way only centuries of friendship could create, but he had warmed to her eventually, even going so far as to compliment her influence on his friend. The email was brief and to the point, so very Victor. "Elena, I hope you are well. Marcus is not. He has been making mistakes that could have serious consequences for all of us. I believe you should know that he deeply regrets his words to you. I also believe you should know that you were never the problem. He is afraid, as he has always been afraid of anything that matters to him. I am not asking you to forgive him, only to consider that fear makes even immortal beings into fools sometimes. If you have any care left for him, please think carefully before you make any permanent decisions about your future. Some chances, once lost, never come again." Elena stared at the email for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. Victor wouldn't have contacted her unless things were truly bad. He was too loyal to Marcus to interfere in his personal life without good reason. Marcus was making mistakes. Marcus regretted his words. Marcus was afraid. Part of her wanted to delete the email and pretend she had never seen it. Marcus had made his position clear. He didn't need her, and he thought she was needy for believing otherwise. Why should she care if he was struggling now? But the larger part of her, the part that had fallen in love with the lonely vampire who read poetry in the dark and remembered every small detail she shared with him, couldn't ignore Victor's plea. If Marcus was making mistakes that could have serious consequences, it meant he was hurting. And despite everything, Elena couldn't bear the thought of Marcus in pain. She closed the laptop and moved to her bedroom, where she pulled a small wooden box from her dresser drawer. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a watch she had bought for Marcus's birthday 2 months ago. It was elegant and classic, with an inscription on the back that read, "Time means nothing when you have forever." She had planned to give it to him with a speech about how he had made her understand the difference between existing and truly living. Instead, their relationship had ended 3 days before his birthday, and the watch had remained hidden in her drawer like a secret she couldn't bear to look at. Elena held the watch up to the light, watching it catch the afternoon sun streaming through her bedroom window. She had bought it because Marcus was always checking his phone for the time, a habit left over from his human years that he had never been able to shake. She had thought it was endearing, this small reminder of his humanity. Maybe that was what he had been afraid of. Maybe letting her help him, letting her see his vulnerabilities and fears, had felt too much like admitting he was still human inside. Maybe needing her had scared him because it meant acknowledging that even after 800 years, he wasn't as invulnerable as he pretended to be. Her phone rang, and Elena jumped, her heart racing with the hope that it might be Marcus finally calling to apologize. Instead, it was her mother, the last person she wanted to talk to when she was feeling emotionally fragile. "Elena, dear, I wanted to check on you." Her mother's voice was carefully cheerful in the way that meant she was about to say something Elena wouldn't want to hear. "Your father and I were wondering if you've given any more thought to that nice lawyer I mentioned. David Thompson? He's very successful, and his mother says he's looking for someone to settle down with. Mom, I'm not interested in being set up with anyone right now." Elena sank onto her bed, suddenly exhausted. "Sweetheart, you're 28. You can't stay single forever. And that mysterious man you've been seeing obviously isn't serious about you, or he would have proposed by now. You need someone stable, someone who can provide for you properly." The words hit like a physical slap. Someone who can provide for you properly. As if Elena couldn't provide for herself. As if needing a man for financial security was somehow more respectable than needing him for emotional support and partnership. "I can provide for myself, Mom. I have my own business, my own apartment, my own life." "I know, dear, but it's not the same as having a family. You need someone who can take care of you, someone reliable and normal. This mysterious boyfriend of yours has never even met us, which says something about his intentions." Elena almost laughed at the irony. Marcus had never met her parents because how could she explain that her boyfriend was an 800-year-old vampire who ruled over a hidden supernatural world? Her mother wanted normal, and Marcus was about as far from normal as it was possible to get. "I have to go, Mom. I have work to do." "Just think about what I said, Elena. David Thompson is a good man with a good job. He's the kind of man who would never make you feel like you're asking for too much." Elena ended the call and stared at the watch in her hands, her mother's words echoing in her mind alongside Marcus's. Everyone seemed to have opinions about what she needed, about what kind of person she should be with, about whether her wanting love and partnership made her too demanding. But Elena knew herself better than that. She had never asked Marcus for anything except honesty and the chance to care about him. She had never demanded more than he was willing to give, had never pushed him faster than he was comfortable going. She had simply offered her heart and hoped he would treasure it the way she treasured his. If that made her needy, then maybe needy wasn't such a terrible thing to be. Elena's phone buzzed with a text, and this time her heart didn't race with hope. She had learned her lesson about expecting Marcus to reach out. But when she looked at the screen, she froze. "I miss you," the message read. "I know I have no right to say that, but I can't pretend otherwise anymore." The number wasn't Marcus's. It was from a phone she didn't recognize. But somehow, she knew it was him. Maybe he had gotten a new phone, or maybe he was trying to hide his identity. Either way, those 4 words hit her like lightning. Elena stared at the message for a long time, her hands shaking slightly. Part of her wanted to respond immediately, to tell him she missed him too, that she had been waiting for any sign that he regretted his cruel words. But the larger part of her was afraid of being hurt again, afraid of being called needy again, afraid of making the same mistake twice. Instead, she turned off her phone and put the watch back in its box. If Marcus wanted her forgiveness, if he wanted a second chance, he would have to do more than send anonymous text messages. He would have to be brave enough to face her, to admit his mistakes, to prove that he had learned something from the pain his pride had caused them both. Elena wasn't needy for wanting love, but she also wasn't foolish enough to accept crumbs when she deserved the whole meal. If Marcus Blackthorne wanted her back, he would have to fight for her the way she had fought for him. And until he was ready to do that, she would keep protecting her heart, even if it meant living with the constant ache of missing him. Outside her window, the rain continued to fall, and Elena allowed herself one moment to wonder if Marcus was watching the same storm, missing her as much as she missed him. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus sent the text message, and Elena's lack of response felt like a dagger twisting deeper into his chest with each passing hour. He had hoped, foolishly, desperately, that she might reply, might give him even the smallest opening to begin earning her forgiveness. Instead, there had been nothing but silence, and that silence was slowly driving him mad. Marcus stood in his private library, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge, yet unable to concentrate on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. The book Elena had left behind sat open on his desk, its pages now familiar from countless readings. He had devoured the story she had recommended, finding painful parallels between the broken hero and his own situation. The main character had also pushed away the woman he loved out of fear, had also spent chapters drowning in regret and self-loathing. The difference was that fictional heroes got their happy endings. Real monsters like Marcus weren't guaranteed such grace. Victor entered without knocking, as had become his habit since Marcus had stopped responding to normal social cues. His second-in-command looked worried, an expression that was becoming frustratingly familiar. The Blackwood clan is threatening to withdraw their support if you don't address the territorial dispute in the north, Victor said without preamble. The council meeting you've been avoiding for 2 weeks is now mandatory. They've called for a vote of no confidence. Marcus turned away from the window where he had been staring at nothing. Let them vote. I don't care anymore. You should care. If you lose your position as king, you lose your protection. There are plenty of our kind who would love to see you dead. The threat that would have once motivated immediate action now felt meaningless. Without Elena, the prospect of death seemed more like relief than punishment. But Victor was right about one thing. Marcus had responsibilities that went beyond his personal misery. People depended on him, and he was failing them just as thoroughly as he had failed Elena. I'll handle it, Marcus said without enthusiasm. When? Because they're meeting tonight, and if you don't show up, they're going to assume you're either dead or no longer capable of leadership. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that had become unconscious since Elena left. She used to tease him about it, would reach up and smooth the strands back into place with gentle fingers that made him forget centuries of careful control. Fine, I'll go tonight. Victor studied him with ancient eyes that missed nothing. You look like hell. When was the last time you fed properly? The question irritated Marcus because he didn't have a good answer. Food had lost all appeal weeks ago. Blood tasted like ash. Nothing satisfied the gnawing emptiness that Elena's absence had created. I'm managing. You're not managing. You're barely existing. Victor moved closer, his expression serious. I sent her an email. Marcus went very still. You did what? Elena. I told her you were making mistakes, that you regretted your words. I thought she should know that you were suffering too. Rage flashed through Marcus, hot and immediate. You had no right. I had every right as your friend and your second to try to prevent you from destroying yourself. Victor's voice was calm but firm. Did you know she hasn't been sleeping? That she's lost weight and looks almost as miserable as you do? The information hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been so focused on his own pain that he had tried not to think about what Elena might be going through. The idea that she was suffering because of his words made the guilt infinitely worse. How do you know that? Because I've been watching her. Someone needs to make sure she's safe while you're wallowing in self-pity. Oh. Marcus wanted to be angry about Victor's interference, but he was too grateful for the information about Elena's well-being to muster proper outrage. Is she seeing anyone else? The question came out smaller than he intended, revealing the fear that had been eating at him for weeks. Elena was beautiful, intelligent, kind. It would be natural for her to seek comfort elsewhere, to find someone who wouldn't hurt her the way he had. No, she's thrown herself into work, but otherwise she barely leaves her apartment except for necessities. Victor paused. She did get your text message, though. I saw her read it, but she didn't respond. Would you have, in her position? The question was fair and painful. Marcus had destroyed Elena's trust with a single word, had made her feel unwanted and burdensome. Of course she wouldn't respond to a simple text message. She would need more than that, would deserve more than that. I don't know how to fix this, Marcus admitted quietly. I don't know how to undo what I've done. You start by admitting you were wrong, publicly and completely. Then you prove that you've learned something from this disaster. Victor's expression softened slightly. Elena isn't vindictive, Marcus. She's hurt and she's protecting herself, but she's not the type to hold grudges forever. If you're genuinely sorry and you can prove you've changed, there might still be hope. And if there isn't, then you learn to live with the consequences of your choices. But you don't give up without fighting first. Elena deserves better than your cowardice. The words stung because they were true. Elena did deserve better, deserve someone brave enough to fight for her. someone who wouldn't run at the first sign of vulnerability. Marcus had spent 800 years believing that strength meant standing alone, but Elena had shown him a different kind of strength. The strength to need someone, to trust someone, to let someone matter enough to hurt you. What would you suggest I do? Victor smiled for the first time in weeks. I thought you'd never ask. First, you're going to that council meeting tonight, and you're going to remind everyone why you're the best leader we've had in centuries. Then you're going to start courting Eleanor properly. Courting her? You rushed things before. You skipped the part where you show her how much she means to you, where you prove that you understand what you're asking for when you ask for her love. Victor's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. Elena is human. She needs human gestures of affection and commitment. Grand romantic gestures, persistent pursuit. Proof that you're willing to fight for her. The idea both terrified and excited Marcus. He had never courted anyone in the traditional sense. Vampire relationships were usually based on convenience, politics, or simple physical attraction. The idea of romance, of putting himself vulnerable in pursuit of someone's affection, was foreign but appealing. I don't know how to do that. Then you learn. You have forever, Marcus, but Elena doesn't. Every day you waste being afraid is a day you could have spent showing her you've changed. Victor left him with that thought, and Marcus found himself staring at Elena's book again. The hero in the story had won back his love through patience, persistence, and genuine change. He had proven that he was willing to be vulnerable, to need someone, to put her happiness above his own pride. Maybe Marcus could learn to do the same. That night, Marcus arrived at the council meeting looking more like himself than he had in weeks. He had fed properly for the first time since Elena left, had dressed in his finest suit, had armored himself in the confidence and authority that had kept him alive for centuries. The gathered vampires fell silent when he entered the chamber, their expressions ranging from concerned to hostile. I apologize for my absence, Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Personal matters have required my attention, but I assure you that my commitment to our people remains absolute. The next 3 hours were spent addressing grievances, settling disputes, and reminding everyone present why Marcus Blackthorne had been their king for longer than most of them had been alive. By the end of the meeting, the threat of a vote of no confidence had evaporated, replaced by renewed confidence in his leadership. But Marcus's mind wasn't entirely on politics. Part of his attention was already focused on Elena, on the plan that was taking shape in his thoughts. Victor was right about human courtship rituals. This felt like the beginning of something, like Marcus was finally ready to fight for what they had lost. She put the rose in water and kept the card, despite her better judgment. If Marcus wanted to prove he had changed, she would let him try. But she wouldn't make it easy for him. Real change took time, and trust, once broken, had to be earned back slowly and carefully. Over the next few days, more flowers appeared, never overwhelming, never pushy, just a single perfect bloom accompanied by a note that showed how much attention Marcus had always paid to the small details of her life. You mentioned loving peonies. I had to search 3 cities to find these in winter. Sunflowers, because you said they always make you smile. Lavender, for the tea you drink when you can't sleep. I hope you're sleeping better than I am. Each note was signed simply with his initial, nothing demanding or presumptuous. Elena found herself looking forward to the daily deliveries despite her determination to guard her heart. She saved each card, reading them multiple times, and wondering if Marcus truly understood what he was trying to win back. But flowers, no matter how thoughtful, weren't enough to heal the wound his words had created. Elena needed more than romantic gestures. She needed to know that Marcus had truly changed, that he wouldn't hurt her again the moment things became difficult. On Friday, instead of flowers, Elena found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a letter, written in Marcus's handwriting but longer than the previous notes. Her hands shook slightly as she unfolded it. Elena, I know flowers and pretty words aren't enough to undo the pain I caused you. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it yet. I'm simply asking for the chance to prove that I've learned from my mistakes. You were never needy. You were generous and loving and brave enough to care about someone who had forgotten how to care about himself. I called you needy because I was afraid of needing you, afraid of admitting that you had become essential to my existence. I was a coward, and I hurt the best thing that had ever happened to me because of my fear. If you're willing, I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow night. Not as a grand gesture, not as an attempt to rush back into what we had, but as a chance to talk honestly about what I did wrong and how I want to make it right. If you're not ready, I understand. I will wait as long as it takes. You are worth waiting for. Elena read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each reading. This was what she had been waiting for: acknowledgement of his mistake, understanding of why it had hurt her, and a genuine desire to make amends. It wasn't a complete apology yet, but it was progress. She looked at her calendar, considering. Dinner was a big step, bigger than accepting flowers or reading letters. Dinner meant facing Marcus directly, looking into those ancient eyes that had once made her feel seen and loved and chosen. It meant risking her heart again. But maybe it was time to take that risk. Maybe Marcus deserved the chance to prove he had learned something from the pain they had both endured. Elena picked up her phone and typed a simple response. Saturday night, 7 o'clock. I choose the restaurant. It wasn't a forgiveness. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation. But it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were the bravest thing of all. The restaurant Elena chose was deliberately public and deliberately casual. A small Italian place downtown that served excellent food without any pretense or atmosphere that might make their conversation feel romantic. She arrived 10 minutes early, wanting to be settled and in control when Marcus appeared. She had chosen a simple black dress that made her feel confident without being too formal, and had spent an hour practicing the speech she wanted to give him. Marcus arrived exactly at 7, and Elena's carefully planned composure nearly crumbled at the sight of him. He looked different than she remembered, though it took her a moment to identify what had changed. He seemed more human somehow, less like the untouchable vampire king, and more like a man who had been through something difficult and come out the other side, changed. He had dressed down too, wearing dark jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual perfectly tailored suits. The effect made him seem more approachable, though his natural elegance couldn't be completely hidden. When their eyes met across the restaurant, Elena felt the familiar flutter of attraction, mixed with the newer, more complex emotions of hurt and wariness. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said quietly as he sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. "I've been asking myself all day if this is a mistake." "Is it?" Elena studied his face, looking for any sign of the arrogance or dismissiveness that had hurt her so badly before. Instead, she saw something she had rarely seen in Marcus: uncertainty. He was nervous, she realized. Actually nervous about this dinner, about her opinion of him, about whether she might walk away again. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "That depends on what you have to say." The waiter appeared to take their drink orders, giving Elena a moment to center herself. When they were alone again, Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table between them. "I've been thinking about what to say to you for weeks," he began. "I've rehearsed apologies and explanations and promises, but none of them feel adequate for what I did to you." "Try anyway." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath that seemed strange on someone who didn't technically need to breathe. "You were right when you said I didn't have to carry everything alone. You were offering to share my burdens, to be my partner in the truest sense, and instead of being grateful, I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" "Of needing you." The admission came out quietly, but with absolute honesty. "I've spent 800 years believing that needing someone was a weakness that would get me killed. I've watched vampires destroyed because they trusted the wrong person, loved the wrong person, let someone matter more than their survival instincts. When I realized how much I had come to depend on you, how much your opinion mattered to me, how much your presence had become necessary to my peace of mind, I panicked." Elena felt some of her anger beginning to soften, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook yet. "So you decided to hurt me instead of dealing with your fear?"
Yes. Marcus didn't try to defend himself or minimize what he had done.
"I hurt you because I was afraid of being hurt myself. I chose my fear over your feelings, and it was the worst mistake of my very long life." The waiter returned to take their dinner orders, but Elena barely noticed what she requested. Her attention was entirely focused on Marcus, on the way he was looking at her, like she was the most important thing in the world, like her forgiveness mattered more than anything else. "I need you to understand something," Elena said when they were alone again. "What you called me, the way you dismissed me, it didn't just hurt my feelings. It made me question everything about myself, about us, about whether I had completely misread our relationship." Marcus's face went pale, and she saw him flinch as if her words had been a physical blow. "Elena, let me finish." Her voice was firm but not cruel. "I spent weeks wondering if I really was needy, if I had been too demanding, if I had pushed you faster than you were comfortable going. I replayed every conversation we ever had, looking for signs that I had been asking for too much." "You weren't," Marcus said urgently. You never asked for too much. You never asked for anything except honesty and the chance to care about me. I called you needy because I was projecting my own fears onto you. I know that now. But for 3 weeks, I didn't know that. For 3 weeks, I felt like maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was too independent for my own good. Maybe I should find someone normal who could take care of me the way traditional women are supposed to be taken care of. The pain on Marcus's face was evident, and Elena almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Did you? He asked quietly. Find someone else? No. But not because I was waiting for you. Because I realized that I didn't want someone normal. I didn't want someone to take care of me. I wanted someone who would be my partner, who would let me take care of them sometimes too. I wanted you, even after what you said to me. Their food arrived, providing another brief interruption that gave them both time to process what had been said. Elena picked at her pasta while Marcus barely touched his meal, his attention entirely focused on her. I read the book you left behind, he said eventually. Did you? Elena was surprised. Marcus had always been dismissive of her romance novels, claiming they were unrealistic and overly sentimental. Several times, the hero reminded me of myself, unfortunately. Proud, afraid, pushing away the best thing in his life because he couldn't handle being vulnerable. Marcus paused. He almost lost everything because of his fear. He figured out how to fight for what mattered. Is that what I'm doing now? Fighting for what matters? Elena set down her fork and looked at him directly. I don't know. Are you? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. You matter more than anything, Elena. More than my pride, more than my fear, more than the walls I've spent centuries building around myself. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway because the alternative is accepting that I destroyed the best relationship of my very long life. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Elena felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to weaken. But she wasn't ready to surrender them entirely yet. What's changed, Marcus? What's different now than it was 3 weeks ago when you decided you didn't need me? Everything. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense with emotion. I've spent 3 weeks living without you, and it's been hell. Not just because I missed you, though I did. Every moment. But because without you, I remembered what I was like before you came into my life. Cold, isolated, going through the motions of existing, without really living. He paused, running his hands through his hair in the gesture that had become so familiar. You changed me, Elena. You made me remember what it felt like to hope for something beyond mere survival. You made me want to be better than I was. Without you, I'm just an 800-year-old vampire who's very good at being alone. With you, I'm someone who might actually deserve the love you offered me. Elena's heart clenched at his words, but she forced herself to stay focused. Pretty words, Marcus. Can. But how do I know you won't run again the next time things get scary? How do I know you won't hurt me again the moment I make myself vulnerable?
You don't know, Marcus said honestly.
I can't give you guarantees, Elena. I can only promise that I understand now what I didn't understand then. Needing you isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's what makes me fight harder, think clearer, want to be worthy of the trust you placed in me. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I can't promise I'll never be afraid again. 800 years of survival instincts don't disappear overnight. But I can promise that I'll talk to you when I'm afraid, instead of pushing you away. I can promise that I'll choose trust over fear, even when it's terrifying. Elena stared at his outstretched hand, so close to hers but not quite touching, waiting for her permission. The gesture was symbolic, she realized. He was asking for her trust but not demanding it, offering himself but respecting her boundaries. I need time, she said finally. This isn't something I can just forgive and forget because you've had an epiphany. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I know. I'm not asking you to forget what happened or to pretend it doesn't matter. I'm asking for the chance to prove that I've learned from it. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, considering. She could feel her heart pulling her toward forgiveness, toward the hope that maybe they could find their way back to each other. But her mind warned her to be cautious, to protect herself from being hurt again. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it differently than before. No rushing into intimacy, no pretending that what happened didn't matter. We start over, slowly, and you prove to me that you're ready to be in a real relationship.
What does that look like? Dating!
Real dating. Getting to know each other again, but this time with honesty about what we both need and want. You learning to trust me with your fears instead of hiding behind walls. Me learning to trust that you won't run when things get difficult. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, whatever you need, whatever it takes. And I want to meet more of your world, not just Victor and the council members you've introduced me to before. If we're going to be together, really together, I need to understand all of what that means. This request seemed to surprise Marcus, and Elena saw something that might have been fear flicker across his face. Elena, some parts of my world are dangerous. Some of the vampires I deal with wouldn't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. Then we'll deal with that together. But I'm not going to be shut out again because you think protecting me means keeping me in the dark. Elena's voice was firm. I'm stronger than you think I am, Marcus. I can handle more than you've given me credit for. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, and Elena saw the exact moment when he truly understood what she was asking for. Not just forgiveness, not just reconciliation, but true partnership. Equal footing in a relationship between equals. Okay, he said quietly. Yes, you're right. You deserve to know everything, to be prepared for everything. I've been protecting you by keeping you separate from the darker parts of my life, but that's not fair to you. Helena felt something ease in her chest at his words. This was what she had needed to hear, not just that he was sorry, but that he understood what had been wrong with their relationship before. So where do we go from here? She asked. Slowly, Marcus said, echoing her words from earlier. We start over, do this right. I caught you properly this time, show you that you're worth fighting for, worth changing for. Elena almost smiled at the old-fashioned phrase, caught me, Victor's suggestion. He said I skipped that part before, assumed that mutual attraction and compatibility were enough. He was right. I never properly showed you how much you meant to me, never proved that I was worthy of the love you offered. And you think you can prove that now? Marcus's smile was soft and genuine. The first real smile she had seen from him since before their fight. I'm going to try. I have forever to convince you, Elena, but I'm hoping it won't take that long. Elena felt her own smile tugging at the corners of her mouth despite her best efforts to stay serious. It might take a while. I'm told I'm pretty stubborn. I'm counting on it. Stubborn enough not to give up on me entirely, even when I don't deserve your patience. They finished dinner in easier conversation, talking about work and books and small, safe topics that felt like practice for the harder conversations to come. When Marcus walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her or push for more than she was ready to give. Instead, he simply thanked her for giving him a chance and promised to call her the next day. Marcus, Elena called as he started to walk away. The flowers were beautiful. Thank you. His smile could have lit up the entire street. The first of many, I hope. Elena drove home with her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. She wasn't ready to trust Marcus completely yet, wasn't ready to pick up where they had left off. But for the first time since their fight, she had hoped that maybe they could find their way back to each other. Maybe love really could conquer all, even when it required patience and forgiveness, and the courage to start over. But as Elena got ready for bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that their real challenges were just beginning. Marcus had apologized beautifully, had acknowledged his mistakes and promised to do better, but promises were easy to make and harder to keep. The real test would come when life got complicated again, when Marcus's fears resurfaced. When they had to navigate the dangerous waters of his vampire world together. Still, as Elena drifted off to sleep, she found herself looking forward to finding out whether Marcus Blackthorn was truly ready to fight for love. Because if he was, she just might be ready to let him win her heart all over again. 3 months had passed since that dinner at the Italian restaurant, and Elena was beginning to believe in second chances again. Marcus had been true to his word about courting her properly, about taking things slowly, and proving that he had learned from his mistakes. He had been patient when she needed space, understanding when she pulled back, and consistently present without being overwhelming. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Marcus was taking her to meet the full Vampire Council, something that had never happened during their first relationship. It was a sign of how much had changed between them, how much trust they had rebuilt, that Marcus was willing to bring her fully into his world. Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the elegant black dress Marcus had sent over with a note that read, "For tonight, you'll need to look like a queen." The dress was beautiful, sophisticated without being revealing, clearly expensive but not ostentatious. It fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised her since Marcus had always paid attention to details like her measurements. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sarah. "Are you sure about this?" Meeting a bunch of vampires sounds dangerous even for you. Elena smiled as she typed back. I'm sure. Marcus will protect me, and I need to see this part of his life if we're going to make this work. It was true. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had been slowly introducing her to different aspects of his world. She had met more of his inner circle, had learned about vampire politics and territorial disputes, had even witnessed Marcus in his role as king during a minor conflict resolution. Each experience had shown her new facets of the man she loved, had helped her understand the weight of responsibility he carried. More importantly, Marcus had been letting her help carry some of that weight. When she offered advice or insights, he listened. When she suggested alternative approaches to problems, he considered them seriously. He had learned to lean on her judgment and trust her instincts, had stopped trying to protect her from the complexity of his position. A soft knock on her apartment door announced Marcus's arrival. Elena took one last look in the mirror, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. She looked like someone who belonged beside a vampire king, she decided. Someone strong enough to stand her ground in a room full of immortal predators. Marcus was waiting outside her door in his formal wear, a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his natural elegance and authority. But when he saw her, his carefully composed expression melted into something warm and admiring. You look magnificent, he said softly, offering her his arm. Are you ready for this? As ready as someone can be for their first Vampire Council meeting, Elena replied, accepting his escort. Any last-minute advice? Don't let them intimidate you. Remember that you belong there because I choose to have you there, and trust that I won't let anything happen to you. The council met in a building that looked like a private club from the outside but felt like something much older and more dangerous once you stepped inside. Elena could sense the age in the stones, the weight of centuries of supernatural politics conducted within these walls. Marcus guided her through corridors lined with portraits of previous vampire leaders, their painted eyes seeming to follow their progress. Nervous? Marcus asked, as they approached the council chamber. Terrified, Elena admitted. But also curious. I've been hearing about these people for months. I want to see what they're really like. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. They're going to test you. Try to find weaknesses, probe for leverage they can use against me through you. Just be yourself, Elena. Your strength has always been your authenticity. The council chamber was exactly what Elena had expected. All dark wood and gothic architecture, designed to intimidate and impress. 20 vampires sat around a massive oval table, their ages ranging from what appeared to be early 20s to late 50s, though Elena knew appearances were deceiving when it came to vampire ages. They all looked up when Marcus entered with Elena on his arm, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Counselors, Marcus said formally, his voice carrying the authority of centuries of leadership. I would like to present Elena Rosewood, my partner and intended mate. The words, intended mate, sent a shock through Elena. Marcus hadn't used that term before, though they had been moving steadily toward a deeper commitment. The formality of it, the public declaration, made her heart race with excitement and nerves in equal measure. An older vampire with silver hair and cold blue eyes spoke first. Rosewood, we've heard much about you. I am Councillor Whitmore, currently serving as the council's spokesman. It's an honor to meet you, Elena replied, keeping her voice steady and confident. The honor may be premature, another councillor interjected, a woman with dark hair and a sharp smile. Tell us, Ms. Rosewood, what exactly do you bring to this union besides your humanity? The question was clearly designed to put Elena on the defensive, to make her feel small and inadequate. A few months ago, it might have worked, but Elena had spent 3 months learning about Marcus's world, understanding the challenges he faced and preparing for this moment. I bring perspective, Elena said calmly. As a human who works in design and project management, I understand logistics, problem-solving, and negotiation from a different angle than most vampires. I also bring connections to the human world that could be valuable for maintaining the secrecy and safety that our community depends on. She had deliberately said, our community, claiming her place rather than asking for permission to belong. Councillor Whitmore raised an eyebrow. Interesting. And how do you propose to handle the inevitable conflicts that arise from your human limitations? You age, you're vulnerable to injury, you have a finite lifespan. How do we know you won't become a liability? Elena felt Marcus tense beside her, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm to keep him from intervening. This was her test to pass. Every partnership involves accepting certain vulnerabilities, she said. Marcus's immortality doesn't make him invulnerable to political threats or emotional wounds. My humanity doesn't make me useless in a supernatural world. We've spent the past 3 months learning how to protect each other's weaknesses and amplify each other's strengths. And when you die? The question came from a younger-looking vampire with cruel eyes. What happens to our king when his human mate inevitably leaves him through death? The room went completely silent. Elena felt the weight of every vampire's attention, felt them waiting to see how she would handle the question that got to the heart of every vampire-human relationship. I hope Marcus will mourn me and then find a way to be happy again, Elena said simply. The same way I hope you would want me to move on if something happened to him tomorrow. Love isn't about avoiding loss. It's about deciding that the time you have together is worth the pain of eventually losing it. Several vampires exchanged glances, and Elena thought she saw approval on a few faces. But the questioning wasn't over. You were involved with our king before, Councillor Whitmore said. The relationship ended badly, we're told. How do we know this reconciliation isn't simply temporary infatuation that will end in another dramatic separation? This time Elena saw Marcus's jaw clench, but again she kept him from speaking. Because this time we're building our relationship on honesty instead of assumptions, Elena said. The first time, Marcus tried to protect me by keeping me separate from parts of his life. I tried to help him by pushing past boundaries he wasn't ready to lower. We both made mistakes, learned from them, and decided our connection was worth fighting for. And you believe you understand what you're signing up for? The female counselor leaned forward. Being the mate of a vampire king isn't a fairy tale, Miss Rosewood. It involves danger, political complexity, and sacrifices most humans couldn't handle. I understand enough to know I want to learn more, Elena replied. I understand that I'll need to develop new skills and accept new responsibilities. I also understand that Marcus needs someone who can be his partner in all aspects of his life, not just the easy parts. Councillor Whitmore studied her for a long moment. You speak well, Miss Rosewood, but words are easy. How do you propose to prove your commitment to this union and to our people? Elena had been expecting this question and had discussed it with Marcus beforehand. I'm willing to undergo whatever trials or tests the council deems appropriate. I'm also prepared to make a formal blood bond with Marcus if that would satisfy your concerns about the permanence of my commitment. The mention of a blood bond caused a stir around the table. It was the vampire equivalent of marriage, a mystical connection that would link Elena and Marcus for the rest of her natural life. It would also give Elena certain protections and abilities, making her less vulnerable to the dangers of Marcus's world. You understand what a blood bond entails? Councillor Whitmore asked, his tone more respectful now. I understand that it would connect Marcus and me on a level deeper than human marriage. I understand that it would make me stronger and more resilient, but also more dependent on Marcus's well-being. I understand that it's not a decision to make lightly. Marcus turned to look at her, surprise and something that might have been awe in his ancient eyes. They had discussed the blood bond as a possibility, but Elena's public declaration of willingness was a statement of faith that took his breath away. The council will need time to discuss this, Councillor Whitmore said. Rosewood, you've exceeded our expectations tonight. We'll be in touch with our decision regarding the blood bond and your formal acceptance into the royal household. As they prepared to leave, the female councillor who had questioned Elena earlier approached them. I owe you an apology, she said to Elena. I expected to find a weak human who would be easily intimidated. Instead, I found someone who might actually be worthy of our king. Well done. In the car afterward, Marcus was unusually quiet, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. You're upset that I mentioned the blood bond publicly, Elena said, reading his mood.
I'm not upset.
Marcus paused, searching for the right words. I'm overwhelmed. When you offered to bind yourself to me permanently in front of the council, knowing that they might say no, knowing that it would make you a target for my enemies, Elena, do you understand what you just did?
I claimed my place beside you.
I showed them that I'm not afraid of the commitment they think I can't handle. Marcus pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. You showed them that you love me enough to tie your fate to mine permanently. You showed them that you're brave enough to choose me, even when the choice comes with risks. Elena reached over to take his hand, intertwining their fingers. I showed them what you already knew, that I choose you, Marcus. Not just for tonight or until things get difficult, but for as long as you want me. Forever, Marcus said without hesitation. I want you forever, Elena. Blood bond or no blood bond, council approval or not, I want to spend whatever time you have building a life with you. Elena smiled, feeling the last of her walls finally crumble completely. Then, that's what we'll do. Together. Marcus leaned across the center console to kiss her. Soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, His forehead rested against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I should have said it more often before. I should have made sure you never doubted it. You're saying it now. That's what matters." "No more running when things get scary?" "No more running," Marcus promised. "No more walls, no more protecting you from parts of my life. No more letting fear make my decisions for me." "Good," Elena said, settling back into her seat as Marcus started driving again. "Because I have plans for our future, Marcus Blackthorne, and they all involve us facing whatever comes next together." 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the same council chamber, wearing a white dress that had belonged to Marcus's human mother centuries ago. The blood bond ceremony was simple but profound, involving ancient words and shared blood that connected them in ways that human marriage never could. When it was over, Elena could feel Marcus in her mind, could sense his emotions as clearly as her own. The connection was overwhelming at first, but also incredibly right. This was what they had been building toward, what Marcus had been too afraid to want before: true partnership, complete trust, and a love strong enough to bridge the gap between human and vampire worlds. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, as they walked hand in hand through the gardens behind the mansion they would now share. "Different, stronger, more myself somehow." Elena paused, considering. "I can feel how much you love me. It's incredible. I can feel the same from you. I'll never doubt your feelings again, Elena. I'll never be able to lie to myself about how much I need you." Elena stopped walking and turned to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Good. Because needing someone isn't weakness, Marcus. It's what makes life worth living." Marcus pulled her closer, holding her tight against his chest. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. I'm sorry I almost lost you because I was too afraid to admit what you meant to me." "You didn't lose me," Elena said firmly. "We lost some time, but we found our way back to each other. That's what matters." As they stood together in the moonlight, bound now by magic as well as love, Elena thought about how far they had both come. Marcus had learned to trust in love instead of fear, to see needing someone as strength rather than weakness. Elena had learned that some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight required patience and forgiveness and the courage to start over. Their story wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, political complexities to navigate, and the inevitable difficulties that came with bridging two different worlds. But they would face those challenges together, as partners and equals, bound by a love that had proven stronger than pride or fear. Sometimes the most powerful people really were the most broken inside. But sometimes, if they were very lucky and very brave, they found someone willing to help them heal. Someone willing to fight for them, to stand beside them, to prove that love really could conquer all. Elena and Marcus had found that in each other, and this time they were never letting go.